Hey guys, so we are still in chapter 2, early learning, and we are going to continue our reading. Although we often think that the development of the brain is directly connected to having a great deal of stimulation, there may be other criteria involved. It certainly is important to have toys and other stimuli in a child's environment, yet it may be equally important to have a sense of safety and security as well. The push now is to send young mothers out into the world of commerce, leaving their babies and children in daycare may, in the long run, have a detrimental effect on these children's learning. As Nash points out, without excellent programs for these children, these current drive to curtail welfare costs by pushing mothers with infants and toddlers into the workforce may well backfire. It is my belief that even with excellent programs, the separation from a mother, especially during the first 3 years of life, will adversely affect the formation of synapses. Children need one person with whom they can learn limbic regulation, someone they can count on. Although the best person to regulate an infant is the biological mother, with whom they have a shared chemistry, a well-attuned adoptive mother can be tremendous help in this kind of regulation, so long as she is attuned to their emotional states. What isn't helpful is having different people who are not attuned to the child's emotional states taking care of them. So that's very true. But I do also want to make a note that, it is very possible to have a caregiver, whether it's a nanny or a babysitter, a grandparent, a teacher. I've been both a nanny, a babysitter, and a teacher, as well as a mom, and it's very possible to step into that role for that time being while a parent works. Now, I will say that having shorter times with those children and allowing them to regulate and calm down, and again, every child is different, will be a lot easier than a child who is, say, in a daycare setting from 8:30 to 6:30 and then having been picked up by a nanny instead of a actual parent. Because I've had that. And my heart goes out to those children, even though they're not adoptees, because they still need parent time. They still need those connections. But it's also very understandable that, in our world, especially today, and the way that our economy is and our society, we tend to need to have both parents working, especially outside the house. Now, since the pandemic, things have begun to change, so a lot of parents are working in the house or beginning to homeschool and helping others. Like I said, I've done a lot of different things in my life. But I can tell you that being a parent, especially being a homeschool parent and co-parenting with my son's father, I can tell you on the nights that he is at his dad's, I can feel his anxiety, even though I'm not physically there. I can just tell. And I know it sounds like really strange, like my son's older, he's almost 11, that I don't text him, because I know that'll freak him out, that'll cause more harm. But what I do is, knowing that he has my phone on the weekends, knowing that he has my phone, I know he's on YouTube, I check the videos and see what he's watching and when he's watching. Now, I can't tell you the exact time, but I can tell you, like, if I was watching something at, say, 10 p.m., and then the next video is one of his, I know that he was still up. You see what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like that connection. But that's exactly what these babies need, right? Or we need, because we need that connection. And when you are adopted, especially as an infant, we lose that ability to feel safety. I talked about it prior a few times with the NICU babies, where when the biological parent, and it's not just the mother, it's the father too, right? Like, I want to make that clear. Babies also have a connection to the father. It's not necessarily the biological mother. It's a lot easier to have that connection with the mom because of, having grown in utero and all of that. But the reality is babies do also know their father's voices and can have similar connections. But we need that connection. And when you're adopted, you lose that because you don't have that automatic connection to your adoptive parents, right? So an example, sorry guys, I'm going on a little story time here, right? A couple stories. So my adoptive parents kept talking about how when they came to see me in the hospital, I think I was like a day old when they finally got there. And my dad was holding me, and I just like gazed up at him, and he was like, I felt this immediate connection, and like I just knew. But I'm thinking back, like, it's not that I don't love you, but you're still considered a stranger. Like, I don't know who you are, you know? And usually babies have good intentions, or can feel the good intentions, right? Babies tend to know, just like animals. Like, they may not cry around you if they know that you're a good person. Animals will tend to like come to you, that kind of thing. Or vice versa. Animals might steer away or like try to bite you, feel more aggressive. Babies will cry. They don't want that, right? And so it's very interesting, the narrative of hearing this from the adoptive mother instead of thinking about it from the adoptee point of view, where they're strangers. And all we're doing is looking for that connection and safety. And, like I said, I've nannied, babysat, and taught. I was a teacher at 2. Sadly, some of these children need that external caregiver. When I say external, like the non-parent, because that is when they feel the safest. And they should always feel safe with us. But if they feel safer with a caregiver, there's something wrong. There's something lacking in the biological connection, or in the parental connection, I should say, because we're talking about adoptees to the adoptive parents, right? And a lot of the times I'm seeing these parents, sorry, I'm still ranting here. A lot of the times I still see these parents talking about how these kids struggle to create a relationship with them, and then they diagnose them with RAD, reactive attachment disorder, instead of getting down to the bottom of the fact that they are traumatized children, right? And a lot of these children, like myself, I was not diagnosed with RAD, by the way, but the point is, a lot of us adoptees were adopted at birth, so there's no pre-trauma self, right? And that's big, because we have nothing to compare ourselves to before all this trauma happened. So, we're on this healing journey and we're talking about all this, but it's a lot harder for a lot of us that are domestic infants, adoptees, because there's no comparison to the pre-trauma self, right? We were in utero. Whereas with the foster youth adoptees, I'm not going to say that their challenges are the same. They have similar challenges, but a lot of them are able to differentiate the pre-trauma, the pre-situation that caused them to go into foster youth, to the post, right? And I try not to speak on foster care because that is not my forte. I just want to make that clear. I'm just saying that a lot of the same, they go through a lot of the same struggles, and it's a whole other issue that we need to deal with as a society to do better for children, just overall, So anyway, we're going to go back to our reading here as I told you guys some stories. Anyway, because of the child rearing practices in this country, even biological mothers are probably not as attuned to their infants as African women might be. Okay, what? I'm sorry. I'm going to rant for a minute. I was warned that this book could be problematic, and take it with a grain of salt, which I definitely have been. And maybe we should continue, we're going to continue reading on anyway, but okay, sorry, the comparison. Anyway, let's continue on. During a conference on perinatal psychology, I heard an interesting study comparing the learning styles of African and Western babies. It was observed that African babies progressed much faster than their Western counterparts due to their proximity of the baby to its mother over prolonged periods of time, and the stimuli which they encountered due to this arrangement. African mothers frequently attach their babies to their bodies right after birth and go about their business. Okay, okay, that's where I thought they were going, but I wasn't sure. This is very much like a lot of indigenous cultures, Native Americans, I believe, Asian countries, as well. How do I explain? I'm trying to use the right words. It's a very cultural, common practice, unless it's very westernized. That's where I'm trying to go with it. Where we kind of went about it, right? Where mothers learn to work with their babies. They learn to do things while parenting. So, indigenous people, even throughout history would create these backpack basket type things or wraps and have the baby with them and still be doing farming or weaving, cooking, whatever it may be. And I think that's where she's going with that, right? Whereas with the Western world, especially more modern times, right? Think 1960s and on. Let's say I'm being generous with the 1960s, okay? Where No, scratch that. It was like the 1940s, because of World War II. So, that's a whole history lesson. Anyway, the point is that we westernize things, and instead of mothers typically being home, women began working. Now, I want to say there's nothing wrong with having a career and being a woman, okay? Very much so. It's about balancing, and there's a whole double standard. There's a whole lack of maternity time and maternal time, and how mothers are treated in general. We can definitely rant about that, especially in our country, being the US. But so often, as she was saying earlier, was that, women are typically pushed to like have not even 6 to 8 weeks, which is the typical healing time of after giving birth, to immediately go back to work, right? We don't have that opportunity. We have to like jump right back in and not even take time, not only to do self-care and heal, because giving birth is freaking traumatic, whether it's, a C-section or vaginal. It's traumatic, and it needs healing. But like our society and our economy, especially, like I said, needs us to have two working parents. And again, a lot of people work paycheck to paycheck, so they don't even have that opportunity to take off. It's awful. Anyway, sorry guys, I just went on a whole rant. But I think it's important to make note of these things that, I immediately jumped like, why is she comparing U.S. to Africa? But it's not just Africa. There are other countries that do that. All right, anyway, let's continue on. A story related by one visitor to a tribe in Kenya is illustrative of how much more tuned in to their babies African mothers are than our Western mothers. The man was walking along talking to the mother, who had a naked baby attached to her, when all of a sudden she held the baby away from her while the baby urinated in the bushes on the side of the path. "How did you know your baby had to pee?" The astonished man asked the mother. The mother looked at the man as if he were demented and asked, "How do I know I have to pee?" Who else would be that connected and in tune to that particular infant? This kind of mother-child symbiosis is repeated over and over in less dramatic ways, even in our own less attuned to relationships with our infants. In a new study, Salvatore Manusco of Rome finds that mothers retain cellular material from each of their children after the baby is born. This cellular connection is thought to improve communication between the mother and the child. It seems that African babies sleep a great deal less than Western babies, probably because of all the stimuli keep them from being bored. They feel safe and secure, being close to their mothers, so they do not go into terror mode or shock. This combination of safety and sensory stimuli seem to make African babies smarter than Western babies at an earlier age. This makes a great deal of sense to me as I observe the effects of neglect and sensory deprivation on children. Putting a child in a room by himself or by themselves and hanging a colorful mobile over their head just doesn't do it. I believe that babies learn best when there is almost constant proximity to the mother, stimulating experiences and lots of conversation as they grow into toddlers. They need father and others in their lives to create more connections and stimulation, as well as a great deal of undirected play where they use their imagination and work out their problems. Okay, so I thought I was about to have a problem there with the stimulation, but what I think Nancy Newton-Verrier, the author of this book, is saying is that there needs to be co-sleeping situation. Now, don't come at me. There's a lot of research on this, okay? Co-sleeping does not necessarily mean that the baby is in your bed, all right? And there are ways to safely co-sleep in those situations, even in the US, but many countries, especially outside of the westernized view, do actually do just that. But co-sleeping could also mean that the baby or toddler, child, has their own bed, crib, bassinet, whatever you want to call it, in your room. Having them close by. Now, I can tell you from my personal experience that I feel way less connected to my adoptive parents. Now, yes, I know there's the adoption element to it, than I do as a mother to my own biological son. And I think part of that is I was that baby who had a nursery. I was alone, right? Like, my parents came in and rocked me back to sleep, but I still had my own space, right? And I appreciate the quietness and all that. Whereas on the flip side, I co-sleep with my son. Like I said, he's 11. He has his own bed in my room. And we have a very close connection where, even when he was younger, he could be in the deepest sleep. If I go to the bathroom, that child was up and right there with me. Like, it was ridiculous. Swear to ridiculous. He's gotten a lot better. Like, a lot better. But, doing more research and seeing the benefits of the co-sleeping situation, but also having children being able to sleep with noise, having okay, I know the TV can be iffy, but having TV or music or things like that is beneficial because they learn to sleep anywhere, right? Whereas for some children, if you make it completely silent, they're not able to sleep unless it's replicating those situations, right? Where, all the lights have to be out and it has to be completely silent. That is not always helpful, especially when it's around the holidays or you're traveling. It just doesn't work that way, right? So, we're talking about, being in tuned, but it's also helping your child learn the sensory stimuli and how to cope with it, especially as they get older. Anyway, that is all for today. I hope you all have a great day, and I will see you next time.